We do one-handed blocks with our Hanbo.
This is the Kitsune clan, a group of sword enthusiasts who like cosplay, reenactment, and historical martial arts. If you have similar interests, feel welcomed.
We have recently looked at different striking techniques with the Hanbo, and among them was the one-handed strike. If we can strike with one hand, we should also be able to block with one hand. Shouldn't be a surprise, right? So what we will do here is we go through all of the blocking techniques just with one hand, and I suggest start with your dominant hand. That's the more likely one that you will need and use. Surprise, surprise, the techniques do not really change, but that's something I've pointed out now repetitively. If we have the left hand not on the Hanbo, it can be used to support the Hanbo still. We also still try to attack at the same time. For angle 1, that basically means we attack with the butt side of the weapon, while the left hand is supporting our blocking technique. Think of it, it's a heavy weapon, relatively, and support is always helpful. For angle 2, the things look a bit different. The block is not supported with the left hand. You can do that, but then you are almost in the normal block for this one. But now you can attack with the left hand. For angle 3, I tend to use my left hand to almost immediately disarm the opponent. That comes with this position. And for angle 4, I usually attack the elbow. It depends what you want to have. This is just to remind your left hand that it has a function and that it should be used. People who come from FMA will know what I'm talking about. When you start to teach people the stick, they tend to forget about their left hand. That's the advantage if we, like here, come from the Hanbo with a two-handed use. The left hand knows in principle the position it should have, and now we just reduce the contact with the stick. Why should we use something like that? Yes, sometimes this happens simply. So with the Hanbo, I like the two-handed blocks and whatever, but sometimes I'm simply forced to let go with a non-dominant hand, and then I still have to be able to somehow use this weapon. And my left hand should know how it could help and support the entire action. This may look at first like just Escrima's Lagomano, but it's a bit different due to the different weight of the sticks. These sticks are usually a bit heavier than the ones used for FMA, but of course there is quite some similarity and there can be a lot transferred, just you have to deal with the inertia. You can of course make that even more drastic and, for example, train with clubs instead of with simple sticks, and this can then be further translated, for example, onto the kanabo. And we had already a video on kanabo, we'll link it in the description box. If we think it through, we can usually not directly use Hanbo techniques with the kanabo because we cannot easily grasp the side of the handle because it's armed with spikes and stuff like that in many cases. And then we could do something like we do here, although I would probably also not put the kanabo onto my forearm for supporting it. Still, it gives us a direction into which we can think. Is this absolutely necessary for the Hanbo? I think it's a valuable add-on because in many of the follow-up techniques, it's useful if I have first locked the attacker somehow. And as you can see, my left hand here now is faster in getting to the attacker and is able to lock, block, secure, or whatever the arm of the opponent much better. And that's then helpful for follow-up techniques. You can of course also always use the two-handed version, the half-sword version, and then continue from here. But I think there are quite some situations where this here is useful. We of course will have to explore further mechanics here because this is just the blocking technique, and we know already that we should be able to transit from one blocking technique into another one just to redirect the force or to sweep or similar, and we will have to do that also in some future videos. If you're thinking in the fighting techniques from other stick fighting systems, this is not only comparable here to FMA. We can of course also think into French stick fighting here. Irish stick fighting has been already mentioned quite a bit, but also African stick fighting looks in some aspects similar to what we perform here and opens up for a lot of comparison. Deriving known techniques from already known ones for active learning is very helpful. It can also be limiting if you restrict yourself too much, but we can already foresee here that it's simple mechanics that predicts the optimized positioning of the weapons. Independent whether we have one or two hands, the positions look very similar, and they look very similar to positions we know from traditional Japanese styles, but they also look very similar to positions we know from medieval fencing manuscripts, so Fechtbücher. This should be not surprising for us. The mechanics is always the same, and therefore these things, when optimized for real fighting, should look the same. And I've been pointing out that the Wacht and positions in Japanese sword fighting like Kasumi no Kamae, or also the Chinese Wing Chun Bongzhou, they all follow the same type of mechanical principles, and they apply here to one-handed and two-handed use. Likewise, if we think also of traditional weaponless positions such as those from the Bujinkan, in my view, they only make sense, or they make more sense, let's say it like that, if we think of it as derived from an original position with a stick or with a sword. Think of, for example, here, Wacht position is basically, if you imagine the stick, a Kosei no Kamae, and some others are principle of Jumonji, Ichimonji no Kamae. I think they make much more sense with weapons in their hand as they are otherwise. I still think weapon martial arts have a not so good reputation, and I'm not sure where this comes from. I especially think that stick fighting is so common all around the world, and also it should be very well known, because this is the most likely weapon that you might have ready in a self-defense situation, or in a situation where you have to defend somebody else. And I think if we look at self-defense devices, the Japanese are much further than we are, because they have all these fancy type of polearm weapons for securing an attacker. We don't have that in other countries too much, but if you look for cases where people with knives went crazy, how they have been stopped, these stories often involve people that would use pole arm like things such as brooms or other crazy objects like the tooth of a narwhal, and therefore stick martial arts should be much more popular. What I try here is to explain where a lot of these movements come from, so they don't come out of thin air. They are not just mere traditions that have been given down for centuries. They are direct results of biomechanics. Because of pressure on certain regions, positions of the stick appear over and over again, but it's in fact very few of them, and that's what you also see here. It doesn't really matter one hand, two hand, or whatever. We will explore more complex techniques in some of the next few videos, and I hope you are looking forward to it in the same way I am. For the moment, I hope we could inspire you, and I hope to see you around next time.